You know that trendy orange wine that seems to be everywhere lately? Or what makes a classic port so special? Well, what if I told you the secrets behind some of today's hottest wines aren't new at all? Nope, they're actually thousands of years old. So let's uncork a bit of history and see why these ancient techniques are making such a huge comeback.
At a glance, these two scenes look like they're from totally different worlds. On the left, you've got a cellar in Georgia. On the right, a winery in Portugal. But here's the thing, what you're actually looking at are two branches of the very same ancient family tree. Both of these methods are direct descendants of traditions that are millennia old, a kind of living history hiding in plain sight. So that brings us to the big question, right? In our age of shiny stainless steel tanks and high-tech labs, why on earth are some of the world's most innovative winemakers looking backwards for inspiration? What did our ancestors know that maybe we've forgotten? Well, let's peel back the layers and find out.
To really get why these ancient ways are suddenly so popular again, we've got to take a trip deep into the past. Because before we can appreciate the solutions they came up with, we first have to understand the huge problems the very first winemakers were up against.
I mean, making wine back then was not easy. You had to figure out how to get the juice out of the grapes, for starters. Then, you somehow had to control the heat of fermentation. And maybe most importantly, you had to stop your precious wine from just turning into vinegar. And you had to do all of this without any modern technology. So, how'd they pull it off?
All right, let's start with challenge number 1, just getting the juice out of the grape. Before we had giant industrial presses, the solution was simple, it was super effective, and actually surprisingly gentle. All it took was two things, the power of gravity and the weight of a human foot.
And this structure was called a palmento. At its heart, it's basically a big basin where people would literally tread on grapes. Now, this wasn't just about squishing them. The gentle pressure of a person's foot was absolutely perfect for breaking the grape skins without crushing the bitter seeds inside. And that was the secret sauce. And you can see it right here in its most primal form. This is one of the oldest palmitoses ever found, carved straight out of the bedrock in Italy. It's technology at its most basic, a basin to stomp in and a little channel for that precious juice to flow away. Simple, brilliant, and built to last forever.
What's so amazing is how widespread this was. I mean, look closely at this tomb painting from ancient Egypt. You can see the exact same process. Workers treading grapes in a basin while others are out harvesting. This wasn't just some local trick. It was a fundamental piece of technology across the entire ancient world. Now, let's fast forward to the Roman Empire. What do we see? You guessed it, the exact same method. This relief from the 2nd century AD just proves the incredible staying power of this technique. For literally thousands of years, this was just the best way to start making wine, period. Okay, so you've got your grape juice. Now for the really tricky part, fermentation. This is where all the biology and chemistry happens, and if you get it wrong, all you get is vinegar. And the biggest enemy you have, it's heat.
You see, the yeast that turns sugar into alcohol is a living organism, and as it works its magic, it creates a ton of heat. If that juice gets too warm, the wrong kinds of bacteria can take over and totally spoil the batch. So ancient winemakers had to find a way to keep things cool.
And the solution they found was brilliant. In the region we now call Georgia, they made these absolutely enormous clay jars. They're called kvavril, and then they buried them deep in the ground. The earth itself acted like a giant natural cellar, pulling away the extra heat and keeping the fermentation at a perfectly stable, cool temperature.
So once the fermentation was all done, the last big hurdles were storage and transport. How do you keep the wine safe from oxygen, which is what turns it into vinegar, and how do you move it around without spoiling it?
Well, their solution was this ingenious two-step system. First, the wine would ferment for months inside those massive buried cuvery. Then, once it was ready, it was carefully moved into smaller, sealed clay pots called amphorae, which were perfect for storing or shipping.
And here are some of those Roman amphorae. You know, they weren't just generic jugs. Their shapes were like ancient brand labels. An expert back then could just look at an amphora and know immediately if the wine inside came from Gaul or Spain or Italy. It was their form of marketing and quality control, all in one.
And these weren't small containers either. A typical Roman wine amphora held about 20 liters. To put that in perspective, that's the same as roughly 26 modern bottles of wine.
This standard size was the backbone of a huge trade network that stretched all across the Roman Empire.
So we've seen how they crushed, fermented, and stored wine thousands of years ago. But why does any of this matter today? Well, because these ancient methods never really went away. They just kind of went underground, waiting to be rediscovered.
And honestly, this slide says it all. On the left, you've got ancient Qvevri at an archaeological dig. On the right, a modern Georgian cellar. This isn't just an inspiration. It is the exact same technology. Giant clay pots buried in the earth. It's a direct, unbroken link to a tradition that's thousands of years old.
And this ancient method is the secret behind those orange wines I mentioned. See, normally, with white grapes, you'd press them right away and get rid of the skins. But here, the white grapes ferment with their skins for weeks or even months inside the Qvevri. That skin contact is what gives the wine that amazing amber color, a rich texture, and these complex flavors you just can't get any other way. And it's not just the Qvevri. Hey, remember the palmento, the foot treading? Well, in Portugal, modern versions called lagares are still used to this day to make the absolute highest quality port wines. They believe it's still the gentlest, most effective way to get all that amazing color and flavor for their world-famous product.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? In our constant push for new technology and innovation, we always just assume that what's new is automatically better. But these ancient winemaking techniques prove that sometimes the deepest wisdom is found not by looking forward, but by remembering to look back. It makes you wonder, what other forgotten secrets from our past are just waiting to be rediscovered?